Okay, so moving on. Next up is the head game, our mental preparation for going about our lives armed. So the lifestyle you are adopting requires that you be reasonable and prudent. My friend and mentor, John Farnham, many years coined the phrase of don't go to stupid places with stupid people at stupid times and do stupid things. And it's amazing how sedate and calm your life can be if you adhere to the rule of the stupids. But that's where the fun is. Yes, I got it. And we've all gone to those places at the wrong places in time. But recognize when you do so, you're assuming a bit more risk as a result. Be aware. And by be aware, people refer to it's a fighter pilot term, situational awareness. And it distills to Tom Given's point, is just know who is around you and what they are doing. And I would add on to that, how quickly they can close on you if they choose to do so. If you're in a parking lot and you look around before you get in the car, and you should, because before you commit to a task, you should understand who's around you. If you look around and you see everybody else is putting groceries in your cars, well, then you are very safe to put your groceries in your car because everyone else is task-focused on just getting the hell out of there. If you see people doing this, looking around themselves, looking at you, well, pay attention to people who are paying attention to you. That's very crucial. Be prepared, which distilled means just carry your gun, carry your pepper spray. Have in your mind what you're going to do under what circumstances. This next one's a little bit controversial, but I'm going to throw it out there on the internet. Just don't be an asshole. And if I have to tell you what an asshole is, well, then maybe think about that really hard. There was a scene from Justified some years ago, the series. If you meet an asshole in the morning, well, then you've met an asshole. If you meet assholes all day, you're the asshole. Don't be an abrasive, rough personality. Don't point people out, call them out on things of social behavior without expecting that potentially to escalate. And corollary to that is do mind your own business. Well, but John, what would you do if you saw this? I do have in my mind certain circumstances where I'll get involved to some degree. Be it just sit back and call the cops or come up and say, hey man, that isn't right. But these are decisions that you have to make on your own because there are consequences for every time we involve ourselves in something. If you watch my online series for Street and Counter Skills, there was an incident in Philadelphia some years ago now. A man new to concealed carrying was out for a walk. He encountered a couple having a spat. The couple separated. He walked up to her and said, "Are you okay?" The man that was involved in the conflict turned and said, "Do you have a problem?" It's been my experience that if someone asks you that question in that tone of voice, you do in fact now have a problem. It turned to fisticuffs. The guy got hit in the face. The only tool he had was his pistol. So he shot the guy once in the chest. Down he went dead. The girlfriend immediately, "Oh my God, you killed my boyfriend," and that man is now in prison. So weigh things carefully, what you're going to get involved in and how you're going to go about doing it. I have an acronym, ALIF. We're aware of what's around us and who's doing what. We seek to avoid circumstances and conflicts. We want to be deselected. And by deselection, I'm talking about our continence, what we're projecting to other people. Because we are sending signals out, even the way we walk. We'll send a signal to a predator-type person. How we're dressed, our attention we're paying to ourselves, we're all in our little screen of our life that we carry around now. Well, if we are adhering to looking alert and capable, we can be deselected. I will also throw this caveat out, however. That only goes so far. If you've got something that someone wants, that all goes out the window. They will use whatever means available to them, be it ambush, numbers, overwhelming violence, whichever, to achieve their goal of getting what it is you have. Some of these people, it might be your cell phone. Other people, if they recognize that you have a firearm, well, that can become a very powerful inducement to being subjected to street violence. And don't think for a second that you cannot become a victim. Even though you have a gun, you may not be armed. Or even at that moment when you're distracted, you are not particularly armed. Things to consider. De-escalation has to be contextual and appropriate. If you are having a spat, a conflict over a parking spot, say, and we've all been there, the ability to say, you know what, you're right, I'm out of here, that's your spot, pardon me. Well, that's great. You can de-escalate some situations and from the perspective of a negotiation. And you may very well say, no, I'm sorry, sir, that actually I was here before you, and this is my spot. Perhaps we should have the law enforcement settle this out. Dial it up, dial it down, but recognize at the other end of it, you just don't know who you're dealing with and what it's going to take to set them off. And it's 99.999% certain that whatever you're involved in just isn't worth it. Also, on the de-escalation front, can you de-escalate someone that's holding you at gunpoint? Well, yes. You can comply and achieve your life. There's pluses and minuses on that. I've got that. Can you de-escalate someone who's rocking your head with blows? That's a whole other skill set, a whole other circumstance. Quite possibly not. Next up, we have evasion. If we find ourselves in a situation involving friction, we can evade. It can be just leaving the scene or putting an obstacle between us and the aggressor. We can evade, just leave, or use obstacles. Finally, there's force. And force can range from, hey man, stop right there, to pepper spray, to physical interaction, to the pistol comes out and we fire a controlled parry to the high center mass. There are consequences all across that spectrum. And we have to be weighed in our response. We have to be reasonable. All right. Next up, we're going to talk about what everybody obsesses about, but is actually a relatively small part of the equation. Hardware. What do I buy? And what should I pay for it? Things of that nature. Well, we need to start by defining our requirement for a concealed pistol. And we live in a great era where there's a huge amount of design innovation taking place. To purchase a pistol, you need to ask yourself a couple of things. First off, do I have the physical capacity to manipulate it? Can I run the slide? Can I work the trigger? Can I conceal it? Overarching over that, though, is this pistol going to be as close to 100% reliable with quality ammunition as I can achieve? There are brands out there that do that. Some of them are represented right here. Glock, SIG, Smith & Wesson. There are other numerous ones out there. There are some brands I recommend that you steer away from. For instance, if there is an astrological symbol involved in the brand, I'd recommend that you not purchase one of those guns. Does the gun fit my hand? And by fitment, we're talking about if we mount the pistol high up in our grip, of our hand here, I wrap the fingers around, can my trigger finger, can I reach the trigger without having to do all kinds of crazy grip things to make the trigger work? All considered. A good gun store will walk you through a variety of options to arrive at a good point for you. Keep in mind a couple of things. They're there to sell guns, and not all gun stores are equal. Here we have examples. We have the ubiquitous Glock 19. Been around for quite a while, a very reliable pistol. It's mid-sized in reference to the frame length and the slide length. They conceal quite well. There is now a cousin to the Glock 19, the Glock 48, which the Glock 19 has a double-stacked magazine, which means the grip is kind of wider. The Glock 48, because the bullets are stacked side by side, essentially, or side and a half. The Glock 48 bullets are stacked in a straight column. In the Glock 19, you have 15 rounds. The Glock 48, because it's a single stack, you've got 10. But there's a very innovative company called Shield Arms manufactures a flush-fitting 15-round magazine for the Glock 48. Certainly something to consider. This also you can purchase a Glock 26 for a subcompact gun. These are all 9mm pistols, which is kind of the answer right now for concealed carry and duty pistol round, 9mm. Other manufacturers, you have the SIG P320 or the P365 for more of a compact version. This is another striker fire gun or internally hammer fire gun. You're going to notice this gun actually has an optical sight on it. It's a red dot. Rather than having to think about aiming with our front sight and our rear sight, we merely put the red dot over the target and move the trigger in the rear and achieve our hit. It simplifies things greatly. There's a learning curve associated to making the transition for older, more experienced shooters. I'll leave that to the geniuses, but I think it's going to be the wave of the future, but I'm kind of a Luddite right now. I haven't adopted it yet. But you'll notice you can get a mid-sized gun and a smaller sized gun with the same operating systems for familiarity. Over here we have the Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 and the M&P Shield. Double stack magazine, single stack magazine, smaller gun. Again, buy cheap, buy twice, which isn't really cheap. Or as Pat Rogers used to say, buy once, cry once. Some other thoughts I just flashed on. If you're having a price point issue, don't be afraid to buy a used firearm. Right now the market's kind of crazy, and it can be you're going to end up paying a premium for whatever you buy. And I'm making this video here in mid-January of 2021. So we're coming up on 1 year at the time of the COVID. For anyone who opens up a time capsule, you know, here we are. I would think, plan on for a reliable pistol, you're looking at a $400 to $450 cost investment. Small guns are easier to conceal, but they're much harder to shoot. Sir Isaac Newton's rules about for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, well, they haven't been suspended because of firearms. So if you're firing a 9mm cartridge in a smaller gun, well, it's going to recoil more because there's less mass for it to overcome. You've got less grip to hold on to. The bottom line is that smaller guns are harder to shoot, particularly for novices. And people will go to the gun store and buy a small gun thinking it's not going to kick as much. That's not the case. I've also had very large men on my range with subcompact pistols. And they couldn't get a good grip. They couldn't shoot to save their souls. And I asked them why they bought the gun. Well, so I could conceal it. And I looked at them. I'm like, I can hide a howitzer on you. You're so large. Do you have a larger gun? Well, yeah, I've got the mid-size version of this pistol. We put that on, and shockingly enough, they shoot much better. So size matters. Okay, revolvers. I'm not going to say anything particularly controversial here. In some regards, they've been around for a long time. It's been the default solution for a lot of time for inexperienced shooters. Just buy the little lady a Smith & Wesson. Well, I've got news. These revolvers are much harder to shoot than a modern polymer frame striker fire pistol. That trigger pull both cocks and revolves the cylinder and cocks releases the hammer. That can be a 12 or 15 pound affair, which is more than many people can handle. You're limited to 5 shots. Also, you'll hear, well, I got 6 shots for sure. Well, not so much. The revolver training I've had, the more experienced shooters actually had a brush in their back pocket and between strings had to brush out parts of the revolver to make it run. There's a very complicated internal clockwork inside the revolver in order to have everything line up perfectly as that cylinder comes around to line up with the forcing cone. They're not the answer for the novice shooter that many might believe. I do not recommend them. Some of my friends carry them as backup guns, and I certainly that's certainly a utility. But for me, I think we've kind of moved on.